The Nerdcast Empire is on the air. We are back with another week of podcasting excellence here on the Nerdcast Empire. I am Matt in the studio. Great to have you along with us. It is Thursday. That means it must be Anime Thursday on the Nerdcast Empire. And we got some stuff to talk about again when it comes to Ohayocon. It feels like that could be almost a weekly story at this point. But we got a little bit more news. And then also some news that there isn't news. It's kind of complicated, but we'll get to that. We'll have a couple of other small news stories. And then for those of you watching on Twitch or on the Twitch VOD, we will be breaking down Mike's definitive list of the best anime opens of 2024 spring season. That'll be coming up in the second half of the show. If you're on the YouTube, or if you're on YouTube, you can just go watch this video. If you're on the podcast version of this, you will have to come over to Twitch or on the YouTube to watch that version of the video. Speaking of Mike, he's, as always, joining me in the studio this week. Mike, how's it going?
Oh, it is going. Yeah, we have some news. It seems like once we thought we were going to get a larger portion of it, it kind of dried up again, which is curious to say the least, but definitely enough to talk about, and looking forward to that.
Well, if past trends or any indication of future, evidence or of future activities, yeah, they'll probably drop a bunch of news after we finish this podcast tonight, because it does seem like there's
just waiting on us.
A Thursday cadence to a lot of this news from Ohayocon. So let's kind of get back. We'll kind of double back and go back in time to last week when we had a hiatus last week for our Thursday show, and in large part because on Wednesday night when we were going to do the podcast, Ohayocon and their two new assistant con chairs said they were going to host a Zoom call. So basically, well, first they said they were going to host a Facebook Live. There were some complications with that. They weren't able to do that. So it ended up as a Zoom call, which ended up as two Zoom calls because they didn't realize that there are time limitations to a free Zoom account. And even though they said there was a power outage, in reality, their time ran out on the first call. As you know, you only get 40 minutes when you have more than two people. If it's a two-person Zoom, you have longer. But when you have a group, free Zoom limits you to a 40-minute meeting, and it cut out. But they were able to get it back online. And now they've not posted either of those archives. The second one, they didn't start recording until late. So I have doubts as to whether they'll be able to post that one at all. Most of the news kind of came in the section that they didn't record, but we were there. Both of us watched it. Both of us took notes independently. So I'll go over some of the high points that I saw. Then I'll throw it to Mike, and we'll kind of bounce back and forth till we cover kind of everything on our list, and kind of talk about some of the other things that we've found out since the last time we did this, because we've done a little research on the Dayton area, and it looks like, even though this might not be the best place for a convention, it looks like maybe things are headed in the right direction for the Dayton Convention Center, and we'll talk more about that a little bit later on. So the two guys in the meeting, only the assistant con chair was on camera. The head con chair was eating, in his words, and did not turn his camera on. I will just say about that, having worked on Zoom for the last 3.5 years from time to time, I do get that sometimes that comes up. I will say, maybe you just don't schedule the Zoom call for when you're going to be eating, because I think it was important to put a face behind this new regime of Ohayocon, and the assistant con chair ended up kind of becoming the face of the call, because he was the only one that was on the call that had his camera on. So if I was advising these two, and I guess I am via this podcast, if you're going to do another Zoom call, try to make it at a time where you both can be visible, because you want people, you went to such a length in this call to really say, hey, it's our show, we're in charge, we're making the decisions. You want people to know who those people are so that they can come up and kind of talk to you guys and help you out. The biggest news that came out of this, and it kind of broke a little bit on Facebook in an individual post from Melissa Phelps a few days earlier, but they kind of confirmed that she was stepping back. Basically, she was not running the convention. She was still owning the convention because she still owns it, but she was not going to be making any of the decisions. And these two were the two that were basically in charge. And a couple of things about that. Number one, the decision to move to Dayton was made before these two got on board, so can't really fault them for that. They did basically kind of make it clear that Columbus was out of their price range based on, the size that they were kind of looking for at this point. I think there was probably also a time component to that as well, that they may have kind of gotten things going again too late for that, but that they didn't mention that. That's just my speculation. The other thing, too, they did state is that at least at the moment it is going to continue to be a for-profit convention, which means they did say, I want to make it clear, that they were going to take anything they made off of this convention and put it back into the convention to continue it running, which is how it should be.
No obligation for that.
No obligation for that. Nothing in writing. A lot of things that were talked about. Is it in writing? Is it not in writing? Because in theory, if you own a convention and it is for profit, you could take the profit. Like, that's completely legal, and it's not even unethical. Like, you're running a convention for profit. But again, these guys claim that that was not going to be the case. So basically, that was answered very much early on. Now, I will say a couple more points, and then I'll let you kind of jump in. We can talk about what I've brought up, and then some other points you noted. They did really try to make a point to state that, we're going to make sure staff people are treated well. We're going to make sure they have incentive to be staff on the convention, and make sure that whatever issues happen in the past don't happen again. They also mentioned that at some point, somebody who was involved with the group, the CESI board, ran off with a bunch of money.
Yeah.
Did not mention who that was, but they did say that board no longer exists, which is interesting, because I think that was definitely one of the points of contention of the Sakai Guild group, was that board. Obviously looking to get shuttle services to get to the hotels, and we'll kind of get more into the hotel stuff at the end. And the goal was to try to make it a fun event for everyone. That's kind of where it generally started. So I'll let you come in and thoughts on that stuff, as well as anything else you want to add kind of from your notes.
Yeah, I think first off, just on a high level thing, the eating during the meeting, you scheduled this thing in advance. You knew when it was going to be. I would feel really weird if I was in a work meeting. I mean, I have those periodically. I wouldn't schedule my dinner or lunch during that meeting. I have all sorts of flexibility to move around that. I think, to your point, having your face shown and looking prepared and sounding prepared would have gone a very long way. And honestly, the assistant con chair felt and looked more prepared than the actual con chair did, as far as talking about issues and just kind of having a game plan, so to speak. That being said, they said the con chair has been working in conventions for over 15 years now in various departments. I'm not sure where exactly. Obviously both these guys are just looking to get past whatever happened this past year. It isn't their problem, even though they kind of adopted it by jumping into the positions they have. But at the end of the day, obviously they admitted as much, and we all know that this is something that Melissa still owns. So the people who are hung up on how she potentially treated staff and don't want to support her, this isn't going to change anything for them.
No.
There's really no reason for them to hang around, because they should know that this isn't going to be something they want to be a part of.
Exactly. And again, I think there's nothing these guys can do about that.
No.
Maybe at some point they can, if it does well, maybe they consider trying to buy her out, or maybe there are other people, or she just looks to sell to another producer. Because obviously, there's the guy up in Chicago, yeah, that puts on a bunch of conventions, and maybe you could just kind of loop in with one of those potentially, but that's not an option. I mean, that's the other thing too, is when we talk about the news of this convention, it is October 17th as we sit here. This convention is supposedly happening at the end of January. So we are 3 months basically away.
Time flies, man. Time flies.
It does. And normally you would have your hotel blocks out in like June, July, August.
They're still working on that as of last note. They They have open panel submissions now, so you can at the very least try to schedule a panel.
Yeah, so kind of getting into some of those other points about that. They weren't sure what the food situation was. I looked on the Dayton Convention Center website. It does look like they have food. So even though they mentioned food trucks, I'm kind of curious to see what they'll be able to do, because the Dayton Convention Center does have some sort of food options already on property.
Yeah.
So that'll be interesting to see. I mentioned the shuttles, trying to get you back and forth to the hotels. They mentioned, talking about kind of being priced out potentially of the Greater Columbus Convention Center. They mentioned that they felt like in Dayton they were going to be able to better use the space that they were renting, that a lot of rooms and a lot of space in the Columbus Convention Center that they were buying wasn't being used properly. So they were basically paying for space they weren't using. So they're kind of hoping that maybe this step back, if you will, or step toward Dayton will allow.
They didn't rule out potentially returning.
Correct. They said if it works out well enough that could be a potential. They were not ready to really rule out a lot of things in the future.
Yeah,
and I think that's good that they seem to be very open. Justin Nordell is not involved with the roast anymore. Kind of made it sound like he might not be involved with the convention at all.
That was a very emphatic no when someone asked about Nordell.
Yeah.
And, you obviously don't want to make any allegations or anything, but, he was the guy whose name seemed to get out there when people were looking for refunds prior to the 2024 Ohayocon. So you just kind of wonder what happened there.
Yeah, for sure. And we may never know exactly what happened there, but he seems to not be involved. They did announce a couple of guests, although those announcements haven't come out officially. They just came out on the call. They mentioned Kyle Jones and Michael Senator Nicholas, who are both really, really good guests. Senator Nicholas will actually come up again in a moment when we get to our first news story of the day, because his company that he works with is going to be in the news for a big purchase. But folklore is the theme. They're working on 25th anniversary merch, which they were going to try to show, but they didn't end up being able to show. Again, if I had to advise these guys, I have no idea if these guys will find this, listen to this podcast. I would love to. This is bad because on the one hand, I don't know whether Ohiocon's going to survive this. But on the other hand, there are times where you look at the things they're doing and the way they're doing it, it's like, I could help you guys. I could, for one, I would have told you, use Google Meet because you don't have a limit, so you're not going to worry about the call cutting off. Yeah. And I understand that was a panic move because the Facebook thing, and that's a whole fuzzy area too, because they were like, we're trying to get in be able to control the Facebook, the original Facebook, Ohayocon, but yet there's somebody in control of that account that is replying to people on that account.
Replying to people, posting new things, kind of almost in concert with the new one, but not quite. Clearly, someone currently within Ohayocon is running the old Ohayocon Facebook group. I don't understand why the person who's supposed to be running Ohayocon doesn't have that control. It's really peculiar.
Well, and to his credit, he did mention, at least as far as posts go, that a lot of the things that showed up on there were automatically being posted over from the website and then popping in. But that doesn't apply to replies on that page, which there are replies. So that's the confusing thing, because they couldn't use their new Facebook page because it hadn't been around long enough to do a Facebook Live.
I just think maybe if you're putting me in charge of the convention, maybe you give me some sort of administrative access to the social media.
Well, and again, we don't know who has what is out there, what the whole situation that is, because clearly it's a mess. I don't think there's any disputing that. How much of a mess is still to be determined. So I get the panic part. Hey, we got to find something else. Okay, let's use Zoom.
Throw together a PowerPoint for your meeting.
That's another one. That should have been a must, because the biggest thing about a PowerPoint is it keeps you on task. And the meeting was very much middle to late heavy, because at the beginning, it just felt like they were trying to wade through the comments in the chat, which were kind of out of control, as you would expect.
Yeah.
And then after the first one ended and they came into the second one, then they actually kind of got to the newsy stuff that you wanted. And I think if you have a PowerPoint, you can say, hey, we'll answer all questions in the chat and, via audio at the end. but let's get through the entire slide deck, go through, knock everything out, and then you can double back and answer all those questions that people really want to know. But that allows you, because again, it's not like they didn't know what questions they were going to face. There have been endless comments about Ohayocon for months.
The other thing it would have done is it would have allowed them to send the deck over to Melissa, who still owns the convention, and say, hey, how does this look to you? Is there anything we shouldn't mention? Anything you might want to add to this? Just to make sure that whatever messaging she wants them or allows them to run with, they're actually adhering to. And we're not in a situation where maybe that's why we haven't seen any follow-up to the meeting to begin with.
And that is concerning because, again, it's all about trust with this new group that's running it. And trust is very low right now in the convention. And as we mentioned before, and I want to make this 100% clear, we don't really have a dog in the fight here. We have seen, and certainly a lot of things that the SakaiCon people have said seem to probably be true.
They were the most transparent when the whole thing broke as far as giving examples of what their beef was. So to me, I went into it very neutral, but the more you heard from them contrasted with what the nothing you heard from Ohayocon itself as far as real discourse. I mean, they came out pretty aggressive, but nothing that would tell me, just the average con goer, hey, we're acknowledging that we made some mistakes. You know, the Sakai people just felt more authentic and more transparent with their concerns.
Well, and I think, the things that were leaking out about supposedly the Ohayocon was looking to sue some people and all that right before this call, it definitely, again, repainted Ohayocon in this negative light.
Yeah.
They would have been much better off to send these two out and try to really establish that they're in charge and what happened in the past happened in the past. We are only looking forward and we can only fix things going forward. We can't fix things going backward. And then, and even say like, look, we understand that there's going to be a lot of people don't come back or it's going to be a while. We're just going to try to re-earn your trust one day at a time, put on one good convention after another, and hopefully we can build it back up to where we were.
Honestly, what should have happened is Melissa should have gotten on a call live with these two new individuals and basically said, look, things happened this past year. I apologize to any of our con goers, the guests that have been negatively impacted by what's transpired, really on both sides, but just own a little bit of what happened. Because I think that's what people haven't seen yet and they're wanting to see. But basically say, look, as a result, I'm not going to be running this. It's these guys' show now. They're making all the decisions. Basically, that it seems unfair to put them out first. Like, here, you deal with all the nonsense and all of the aggression from the people who feel like this convention kind of screwed them over. Like, I think she needed to face the heat a little bit.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think that was my one moment of skepticism to start with, was when they went to a Zoom meeting instead of a Facebook Live. My initial thought was that they were going to kind of gatekeep the meeting to keep people that they knew were just trolls online and stuff like that, which to some degree I think is probably a good call. But like you said, even if she doesn't join that Zoom call, you could have her record a video and put it up on the Facebook page, put it up on your social media and just say, here's the situation. I'm stepping aside. I'm not going to have anything to do with it. I'm grateful for my time. Mistakes were made. And to keep Ohayocon alive and try to have it move forward, I've hired these two guys to run this thing. They're going to have full 100% control and authority over what happens at the convention. You're right. I mean, instead they have to come out and make that statement. And then, we spent 10 minutes. Well, you have it in writing. Well, you have it in writing. Do you do this? Like, it became this whole, circle where everybody just kept questioning what these guys were saying. And that's the last thing you wanted. You wanted them to come out and have authority right off the bat. And I feel like they didn't do that. So,
it kind of felt like, as far as changing the meeting platform and the call dropping off, it almost felt like the episode of The Office when Daryl wanted a raise and Michael was reading all the different ways to like screw with someone who wants to have a meeting with you. And one of the options was like change the venue at the last minute.
Yes. And the one thing too that I haven't mentioned yet, but I figured now's a good time to double check it, since it was not that case earlier, was they were still not on the event calendar for the Dayton Convention Center.
Yeah, it's been a couple weeks since I checked, I think, but
not sure exactly where that's at on their website. But
I don't think I've been on their desktop website. I think I've only been on the mobile one.
But that was kind of a last point of event of contention, is that, hey, we still don't have this event on the website, and it's still not there. The 24/7 dance convention is going to be at...
That's way too much dance.
There's a lot of dance. And it's over 3 days, so I'm not sure their naming is actually accurate. That appears to be like 24/3 instead of 24/7.
And I bet the convention center has hours.
I'm sure it does, because, again, it doesn't really have the ability to go all night because of the lack of hotel space. But before we get into the hotel stuff, because that is kind of an interesting side note that's not really related to this call, anything else from that Ohayocon call that you want to mention, or any points, if they're listening, because maybe they listen, I don't know. And again, as we mentioned, I don't have a dog in the fight. I'd like to see the convention survive, but I feel like they took maybe a quarter step in the right direction and maybe like 2 steps back at the same time. It's not a lost cause by any means, but I feel like there are some things I would have done differently, and if I could advise them, there are some things I certainly would do differently the next time before I run another one of those.
Yeah, both these guys seem likable enough, and no one seemed to have anything negative to say about them personally. I think they kind of had this trial by fire here last week. I would like to see them, if they are, and it seems they are, going to take time before issuing anything else publicly. I would like to really see them work on that organization part of it and really come out with something that seemed well thought out, planned, give me visuals and, get this thing back on track, because time's short. And
I think, again, pre-recorded things are okay sometimes. It's all right to have some Q&A time live in a Facebook Live or whatever, but like putting together a video so that you can actually edit it and actually get your thoughts together.
Anything that people can engage with is a good thing when you're in the business of conventions.
Yeah. And I think there's still a ways to go. So it was an interesting call. Now, the other part that I don't think anybody's talked about is I forgot to light up my little indicator, but clearly we are talking about Ohayocon, so we'll light that up there. I was not aware until I was doing a little research on the Dayton Convention Center that there used to be a hotel attached to the convention center. It was a Crown Plaza, then it became something else, and then it just mysteriously shut down like 2 years ago. And there is a local group that is looking to kind of start up a hotel there, and it sounds like it could be open sooner rather than later, as a case where they're going to kind of open it floor by floor, clean them out, renovate it, and then be able to actually have a hotel attached. I know Dayton, the city of Dayton, was looking at like a $60 to $80 million investment potentially on, I don't know if it was just renovating that hotel or more hotels, because if you look at the map, there's nothing close to the convention center, which this time of year is okay. Like, you could walk 5 to 10 minutes and get to your hotel, and it's not a big deal. In the wintertime, it's absolutely a no-go. And, shuttle services obviously are fine, but there is something to be said for being able to just go back to the hotel room when you need to.
Yeah.
Especially if you're in costume, which has been a concern we have read online, that these people are very concerned because they wear their costume, but they don't want to wear it outside or outside the convention. And you're not really going to have a choice if you're going to have to get into a shuttle and go back across town.
Yeah. Connected hotels for a winter convention. That's a big deal.
It is. But it does sound like the city of Dayton is trying, they understand they've put a ton of money into this renovation of the convention center, and they understand when they approved that, it was before this hotel shut down. They were really thinking, hey, this hotel is going to be a big linchpin in this plan, and this renovated convention center is going to attract new conventions, and the hotel, whatever struggles it had. And I'm sure it was probably a case of, like so many businesses coming out of the pandemic, hotels struggled. I stayed in many hotels in 2020, 2021 that were very empty because people just weren't traveling, and a lot of those hotels probably struggled to survive, and that was probably a lot of the reason why that one didn't. So with kind of the boom coming back, I think whatever hotel is there could do really, really well. But it does sound like maybe this is the good time to get in with the Dayton Convention Center, that there could be, it could be a start of a nice area right there.
Yeah, I'll be curious to see and this is all again kind of presumptuous that Ohayocon does in fact take place, and I don't know, and I'm curious what kind of turnout they're going to need to make this Dayton Convention Center a successful thing and something they could continue, even if long term they plan on maybe wanting to go back to Columbus. They got to survive this first.
They do, and that's the question that they couldn't really give an answer to, which is understandable. And they mentioned a lot of it depends on when people buy badges, if they buy them closer to the convention time.
And that's also if Michael Center Nicholas is a booked guest, like, do you withhold announcing him officially in hopes that more people will register after hearing his name, and maybe you want that to be at a higher price tier than the $55?
And that could be. And that's the other thing too, is you just wonder if they shouldn't have just set a price of like $70 pre-sale from the get-go and just said, look, this is a situation we're in. We can't offer discounts early, but we're also not going to raise prices till you get to the door. We're going to make it $80. This is our break-even point to try to save this convention.
Because that's the funny thing, is that we're already in tier 2, and when does it end? At the end of this month, maybe?
I have to assume so.
Like, what have they done from the beginning of tier 1 to now that's like, now I'm going to jump in?
Yeah.
I don't think they've done themselves a lot of favors as far as enticing people to take advantage of these deals.
Yeah, I 100% agree. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens with it. And again, I expect a bunch of news to drop after we finish this podcast, because that seems to be the way it works. But again, I'm rooting for Ohayocon to succeed, even though I know that may not be a popular online opinion. I'm not necessarily rooting for Melissa necessarily. I mean, I don't know her personally. I have nothing against her, but clearly there's at least, like you said, whether everything that the other group said was true or not, we'll never know. We weren't there. But the fact that she's not owned up to any of that publicly is concerning a little bit. As a neutral observer, not just a con goer who's gone to the Ohayocon since 2007, you just want to see that. It's okay, I mean, to admit that stuff is messed up before and that you're going to fix it. I would much rather you tell me that than to say, nope, everything was great and there's nothing to fix, because that seems sketchy when you see a whole group of people willing to walk out of a convention that they loved so much that they were willing to put up with a lot of stuff to try to keep it alive.
And people that you thought highly enough of to let them own and operate various social media platforms for you.
Yeah.
Like, clearly they were far enough in the inner circle where it's like, yeah, you can run the Discord, sure. You can run the old website, no problem.
Yeah.
Like, we'll never really know for sure what happened, but man, like, I feel like maybe this whole thing should have blown up a couple years ago.
It probably should have, but it isn't, and it's here now, so we'll continue to report on it as best we can as more news comes out. This could very well be something we report on pretty consistently between now and January, so we'll do our best to gather the information we get and share it with you as timely as we can. Obviously, it took us about 30 minutes today, but there was a lot to cover. So we're going to get to a couple quick news stories and before we sign off for the YouTube and podcast people. We mentioned Michael Center Nicholas, who to me is a top 5 convention guest at this point.
Yeah.
Just an absolute a legend in the business that doesn't act like one.
Yeah,
like he
very
is
engaging guest.
very engaging, very down to earth. Yet this dude is a huge part of the anime world, and the company he works with, G Kids, or has worked with a lot, announced on Tuesday that Toho, the Japanese entertainment company, has reached an agreement to acquire 100% of G Kids for an undisclosed amount. It will become a subsidiary of Toho International, which is based in Los Angeles. It at least sounds like, as far as G Kids go, it's going to be full steam ahead, not really any changes. Obviously, G Kids has done a lot of work. We talked after getting to see Mike Center Nicholas at a convention that it really felt like they did value high quality dubs, taking your time, actually getting it right instead of just kind of pushing something out the door. And because of that, their movies have done really, really well. And the only thing negative you could potentially say about it is the fact that it is another big Japanese company coming in and buying up a smaller company, which makes a lot of sense for Toho because obviously everybody thinks very highly of G Kids.
Yeah.
but it does shrink the market a little bit, and that always makes you a little nervous, especially in the anime world. But your thoughts on this purchase by Toho?
Yeah, I mean, I think anytime you see these mergers and acquisitions, there's always that sense of like, there won't be any changes. Everything's still the same. CEO's still the same. President's still the same. And you wonder, how long is that going to be the case? Because that doesn't always remain that way. I was looking at some of the comments on the story on Anime News Network, and I think there are obviously people that are concerned, as anyone would be, because it's very rare that these kind of situations, at least recently, have panned out in the favor of the fan or the consumer. Some people wondering what that means as far as the G Kids projects that aren't Japanese or aren't a part of Toho. Like, I guess if you look on their Wikipedia, I mean, they've distributed cartoons and animation from so many countries. Like, it's a pretty wild company, but you wonder if that's going to change moving forward. I'm certainly concerned as much as anyone else, but I'm also thankful that it wasn't Sony that bought them up. So
True.
I think there's that as well.
And at some point, a lot of these small companies almost don't have a choice, because when you have so many big players in the market, you just eventually you need more funding, you need more support, and you need more certainty of what what's going to happen in the future. So I totally get it, but it is a little concerning. But at the same time, like you said, not Sony buying up another company, so that certainly is encouraging. And they're two companies that are pretty well respected for the work they do. So you have to think the combining of the two forces together could make for some really good stuff. And
I would certainly rather a Japanese company buy them up than Disney.
That's
or
another
any other Western entity.
Yeah, sure. So this is one of those kind of, we'll keep an eye on it. I feel like I say that a lot with our news stories, but I think the full effects of it are not going to be known for some time. But certainly a big story, definitely shook up some people in the industry. So we will definitely let you know as that story continues to unfold in the days and weeks to come. One final story, which I thought was funny, because I actually originally found a column complaining about this, and then I found the news story that actually talked about it.
I hate the story.
and that was the thing. It talked about Crunchyroll exploring the idea of shorter anime projects to suit the preferences of younger generations for short form content, such that is seen on TikTok, according to a new interview. And again, I think the thing that people have to keep in mind is, yes, Crunchyroll does do some co-promotion anime, but there's still a lot of anime made in Japan that Crunchyroll, they'll either license for release or they don't touch at all.
Yeah.
So it's not like the sky is falling on anime. It's not like everything's going to be 2 to 4 minutes. And to some degree, we've seen this. Like I mentioned Nijion, the 4-comic spinoff of the Nijigasaki Love Live anime, which is basically 3-4 minute episodes. And I don't think it was for that reason. It was basically animated around one gag, and that was it. And so I mean, it's not like this is new.
Yeah, there are several at least titles on Crunchyroll that are like that.
Yeah. And I guess the question is, are they seeing those shows do really well? And that's, hey, people are really gravitating toward these because they are short. I mean, I feel like this is one of those get off my yard type of stories where like every generation probably looks at the one after it and is like, you guys are ruining everything because of this. And one time it was, you guys are ruining everything because you want dubs on this pristine Japanese anime, and you don't want burned in subtitles, or it just feels like there's always a new issue. And now the new issue is like, hey, you don't have the attention span to watch a 21-minute episode, so we're gonna make these shorter. But I can't see any major changes to the industry for this, but
I think a lot of it depends on how some of these pan out, because I mean, they do mention several other instances where people are pursuing this kind of content. The former president of Bandai Namco Pictures, Masayuki Ozaki, left the company recently to establish a new anime studio, Creadom 8, specializing in shorter animation projects. They mentioned there's a Japanese-based production studio, Tokyo Epic, that announced that they're setting up a distribution platform and dedicated studio for short-form content. The one that really got me was toward the end of the article. It was like, numerous NFT-based companies, such as Azuki, also use short anime as a launch pad for the space. Azuki partnered with anime legend Goro Taniguchi from Code Geass and One Piece film Red, and Junichi Yamamoto, why Raylina ended up at the Duke's Mansion, for an anime earlier this year. I just feel like it never fails that when there's something that I think is kind of gross, like next thing you know, you see NFTs attached to it.
It does feel like that's a way for them to get in the door, which is always kind of gross. You see it in the video game world too, a lot of times where they kind of get into some of these freeware games to basically make it financially make sense, I guess. But I mean, in the end, I mean, the consumer will always decide. And if there's a market for it, it's going to exist. I mean, it's kind of like the days of the OVA, OAV. I don't want to say they've gone away, but they've certainly lessened. And there was a time where you got a lot of them, it felt like. Now it is more your TV series. But the other thing to consider, too...
Well, they kind of met halfway, where now you're seeing just a lot of like 12 and 13 episode shows.
You don't get the...
Where it's kind of the middle ground between the shorter OVA and like a full 26 episode slate.
Yeah, I mean, there's still a few shows that go over, but it's not as many as it used to. And, you know, there's still a lot of corporate sponsorship in anime. Like you see program sponsors. I mean, if you watch like the raw Japanese footage, they have the slate with this show is sponsored by this company. So, I mean, those companies are not necessarily going to want a 2-minute show. They're going to be paying for the full 20-some minutes so they can have the full sponsorship.
I don't know if consumers are going to want to pay for that when they can just pull up TikTok and watch short form video for free. I think these are, there may be some overlap, but I think these are two separate markets.
Yeah.
I think you're not going to be able to really tell the same deep, meaningful story in short form content that you can in 24-minute episodes extended over 13 to 26 episodes. I think, too, you can kind of mess with yourself thinking like, okay, the Big Mac outsells Chicken McNuggets. So if Chicken McNuggets were Big Macs, we'd sell even more of them.
Sure.
Like, no, sometimes there needs to be some diversity in the market, and you have to supply all the products for people.
And again, I think there's always going to be a demand for some short form content. And I think gag animes work really well with that because you can have that 1 or 2 gags that you don't want to play out over 20 some minutes. It really is like a 3 or 4 minute thing. You hit the joke, the punchline, and you're out. But I think there's also going to be that I don't think long form anime is going away. I don't think movies are going away, but it's interesting. And it's probably these stories are as much to rile up old people as it is about making money, because some of this stuff, like we've mentioned, has existed for a long time.
Yeah.
You know, but it's always, now we can find a reason why they're going to make more of it, and let's put an article out because of it. But we use it here for content too, so you know, I guess it works.
Yeah, I mean, at least it's better to do that than to not make content out of it and still read it and complain about it.
That's very true. We just complain about it on the podcast instead.
Exactly.
So, before we jump to our next section of the podcast, I want to remind you that you can check out our website, nerdcastempire.com. Check out our store while you're there. Check out previous episodes of the Nerdcast Empire. There have been people actually downloading some old episodes. We really appreciate that.
Awesome.
Of course, you can always catch us live, usually twice a week, Thursday and Sunday in most cases, at twitch.tv/Nerdcast Empire. Drop us a follow while you're there. We're still trying to work our way up to 50 followers. We've been stuck on 25 for a while, and we're very grateful for those 25 people. We'd love to keep moving our way up to be able to do some more cool things here on the Nerdcast Empire. We'll be back on Sunday, another episode of Music Weekly. It is October the 4th, I believe, is our date this week, and getting ready to go through the music probably tomorrow. I know you've already gone through it, so interested to see what we've got on the slate for this week.
Yeah, it's not bad. I think last week might have been a bit stronger, but I think there's still plenty to get into.
So check it out Sunday, 7 o'clock Eastern on the Nerdcast Empire. And a good time to mention, we are getting back into my busy time of the season. I feel like that almost never ends. So certainly tune in, and if we have schedule changes, we'll pass them along to you. I know in a couple of Sundays we have a Wrestling Premium Live event that night, so we may end up either time shifting the music podcast or moving it to Monday or something like that. So we'll let you know. We'll definitely post it out there, and we'll try to get our Discord open soon, because that'll be the best place to find out about our upcoming schedule in our Discord. But we're not quite there yet, but we'll get it up and running very soon. If you're watching us on YouTube, if you are listening to us on the podcast version, we are going to get ready to jump to the close of this episode. If you're on the YouTube version, you should see a link pop up right about now. And I will go ahead and mark this by lighting up the next segment on this show, so I remember to do that. But you should see a link pop up that will take you to Mike's video, The Best Anime Opens of Spring 2024. So you can jump over there and watch that. All we're going to do in the ending is basically just repeat all the stuff I just said. So we're going to get ready to do that. And again, if you're on the podcast version, twitch.tv/Nerdcast Empire for the VOD, or again, you can jump over to YouTube, click the link to Mike's video, and you can jump over and watch it there. So for you people, we're going to be jumping out. And
what do you mean, you people?
for all you YouTubers and podcast listeners, you're going to be headed to the end of this episode very shortly. For everybody else that's here with us live or on the VOD on Twitch, we're going to get ready to listen to some music. And we welcome back our YouTube friends and our podcast friends to bring the podcast to a close. We're so glad you came back in time for us to bring this week's podcast to an end. We appreciate everybody joining us once again. And again, if you are rejoining us on YouTube or on the podcast network, go over to Twitch, go check out Mike's YouTube video, which you should have seen a link for in the YouTube video version of this podcast, to check out those top opens from spring of 2024. Reminder, coming up Sunday, another episode of Music Weekly. We'll have the music of October the 4th. Looking forward to that, 7 o'clock Eastern Time. We'll be back next Thursday night for another episode of Anime Thursdays. It's probably time for us to give you some more music. We'll probably do music back-to-back weeks, so we'll probably pick another 5 songs.
Talk about Ohayocon.
We'll probably be talking about Ohayocon again next week. But tune in to find out for sure, 7 o'clock Eastern next Thursday on the Nerdcast Empire. Big thanks to Stove Lake Media for their continued support of our podcast. Big thanks to Mike for putting that video together. And, of course, big thanks to everyone who listens or checks us out on the VOD. We really appreciate it, as always. That's going to wrap things up for this Thursday night for the entire crew. I'm Matt saying so long. Don't forget to join the Empire, the Nerdcast Empire.